Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, our brethren in Georgia, and Kansas, in Fiji Island, in Mexico, Spain, in Africa, to the United Kingdom, to our brethren in Pakistan, and also to our brethren in Australia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. This is our episode number 21 on the subject, the chronological order of events. And it is especially dedicated to our beloved brother Steve and sister Corinne, and to the rest of the brethren who are listening and continually viewing this program. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. And to repeat again, the most important part of the history of the church in the last generation of men is that predicted event saying 2 years from that date we will be in the kingdom era. I would like to read 1 TG number 11 on page 8. It says, if the people of God had gone to work as they should have gone to work right after the Minneapolis meeting in 1888, the world could have been won in 2 years, and the Lord would have come. General Conference Bulletin 1892. I think there's a statement in General Conference Bulletin saying, or Review and Herald, try to locate that statement. We would be in the kingdom era 2 years from that date. That historical event in 1888, that if that church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, accepted the message delivered to them, supposed to be, they would be in the kingdom era 2 years from that date. And we will try to prove to you that that predicted event is now fulfilling on this very year, the year 2020. That 2 years from this year, we would be in the kingdom era, my dear brothers and sisters. Now, I would like to read 2 TG number 31 on page 3. And the quotation here is Acts 3 verses 19, 20, and 21. It says, repent ye therefore and be converted, that your sins may be blotted out, when the times of refreshing shall come from the presence of the Lord, and he shall send Jesus Christ, which before was preached unto you, whom the heaven must receive, until the times of restitution of all things, which God hath spoken by the mouth of all his holy prophets, since the world began. Then it says, here we are told that the heavens must receive the Lord, not forever, but until the times of restitution of all things. He is therefore at the time of restitution to return to earth. Shall this returning be unexpected? Or shall the Lord first send someone to prepare his way? And if someone is to precede his coming, who will it be? And he answered and told them, Elijah verily cometh first, and restoreth all things. Mark chapter 9, verse 12. Now, the coming mentioned here is Malachi 3, and every shepherd's rod believer understood that it is not the visible coming of Jesus Christ. Malachi 3 and Daniel 8 is pointing to the same event. Now let us read 2 SR 184. It says here, the description by Daniel applies to the commencement of the judgment for the dead. But the one by Malachi 3 verse 1 to 3 is applicable to the judgment for the living. All of the same event, Day of Atonement, cleansing of the sanctuary. So here, the shepherd's rod made it so plain that Daniel 8 verse 13 and 14 and Malachi 3 verses 1 to 3 are pointing to the same event, the Day of Atonement, which is the cleansing of the sanctuary. Now let us focus our attention, brothers and sisters. Let us dig deeper concerning the cleansing of the sanctuary, which is the central pillar of the Advent faith, according to Evangelism 323. Now, here in the consecrated way to Christian perfection, on page 113 and also page 118. Now, I would like to read. It says, the cleansing of the sanctuary and the finishing of the mystery of God are identical as to time and are also so closely related as to be practically identical in character and events. And in 114, it says, and the time of this cleansing of the true is declared in the words of the wonderful numberer to be unto 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, which is the sanctuary of Christ in AD 1844. So, first of all, brothers and sisters, the cleansing of the sanctuary is pointing primarily to the sanctuary itself, even as illustrated by the Levitical priesthood, that the sanctuary itself must be cleansed. So, in October 22, 1844, there must be a sanctuary that had been cleansed at that time. And what does it mean by cleansing of the sanctuary? Now, it is little bit deeper ones concerning this portion by which the sanctuary itself in heaven had been cleansed in October 22, 1844. Now, to get the full beam of light, let us try to explain this reading in Revelation 21 verse 27. It says, and there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination, or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. This verse is primarily applied to the most holy place, the presence of God the Father. Now, let us read 2SR page 199. 2SR page 199. It says, the sea is the most extensive body upon the earth. Thus it is used to represent eternity. So that is pointing to the sea of glass. So I would like to focus first to that portion in the book of Revelation, that there is a sea of glass like unto crystal. It says, the sea is the most extensive body upon the earth. Thus it is used to represent eternity. Clear as crystal, denotes perfection, freedom from sin and defects. In Revelation 15 verse 2 we read, and I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire. Fire would be the only perfect symbol that could be used to represent life. Therefore, the sea of glass proceeds from God's throne and represents life eternal, which is the reward of those whose names are in the Lamb's book of life within the seven seals. And there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination, or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. Revelation 21 verse 27. So here Revelation 21 verse 27 is pointing to that throne, by which from that throne proceeds the sea of glass like unto a crystal, by which no one is allowed to enter therein which defileth, according to this reading in 2SR page 199. Now here's another statement that I would like to read, brethren. 2SR 192. 2SR page 192. So it says here, only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life are brought into the presence of God in the most holy place. So the presence of God, pointing to God the Father, His throne is in the most holy place. And only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life are brought into the presence of God. Or in other words, there is no other book by which Jesus Christ brought into the presence of God are the books, or the book called the Lamb's book of life, sealed with seven seals. It is stated on the next paragraph that I would like to read. It says, the book sealed with seven seals. So that Lamb's book of life, it is sealed with seven seals. In the right hand of the great judge must contain the names of those whose sins are to be blotted out. And no one would disagree that the only sins to be blotted out are the sins of the righteous. The sins of the wicked cannot and will not and will never be blotted out. Now here in 2SR 184, it says, the virgins were called to meet him, and thus by faith go in with him to appear before the Father. That is pointing to the wise virgins. The wise virgins were called to meet him, and thus by faith go in with him to appear before the Father, the great judge. The seal is the permit. It places their names in the Lamb's book of life, and thus it grants to them the right to appear before the Father in the judgment, not in person, but in figure, thus having their sins blotted out. This statement is perfectly corroborating with the statement on the great controversy on page 421 and 422. It says, let us read. And as the typical cleansing of the earthly was accomplished by the removal of the sins by which it had been polluted, so the actual cleansing of the heavenly is to be accomplished by the removal or blotting out of the sins which are there recorded. But before this can be accomplished, there must be an examination of the books. Examination of the books of record to determine who, through repentance of sin and faith in Christ, are entitled to the benefits of His atonement, or to the benefits of His atonement in the most holy place. And of course, the only one that will be benefited with the atonement in the most holy place are only those who have the permit. And what is the permit? The seal of the living God. 2SR page 184. Now, I would like to connect to you at track number 15 on page 19, beginning from pages 8 and then page 19. track number 15. It says, pages 18 and page 19. Although the proceedings of the first two sessions are somewhat different, they are in all other respects similar. The third, however, is entirely unlike the first two. The difference are seen in that before the half-hour silence occurs, there is at the throne a sea of glass like unto crystal. Revelation 4 verse 6. And no one stands on it, but after the half-hour silence passes away, the scene changes. The sea of glass is mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. Revelation 15 verse 2. In other words, at the first judicial sitting, there is no one standing on the sea of glass, and the sea itself is like unto crystal, while at the second sitting, the sea appears like unto a fiery stream, and the saints stand on it. Now, let us ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. There are only two sittings. And the voice of inspiration says that at the first sitting, there is no one stands on the sea of glass. But on the second sitting, the saints is standing on the sea of glass. We know that that could not be literal, because the saints is on earth and the sea of glass is in the heavenly sanctuary. It is in the most holy place. I would like to read to us our 100. Let's read to us our page 198 and 199. So, it says, sea of glass. So that is the sea of glass. 2SR 198 and 199. It says, sea of glass. And before the throne, there was a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne, and round about the throne, were four beasts full of eyes before and behind. Revelation 4 verse 6. According to the punctuation in the verse just quoted, it means that the beasts are in the midst of the throne and round about the throne. It would be impossible for them to be in the midst and also round about the throne, which is the mercy seat. If they were in the midst of the throne, they would be taking the place of God, God the Father, the Judge, and His Son, the Lamb. Thus, we conclude that the first clause of the verse is mispunctuated. By omitting the colon, the scriptures would read as follows: And before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal, and in the midst of the throne. Thus it is the sea of glass in the midst and before the throne, and not the beast, and not the beast. The sea of glass proceeds from the throne and is a symbol of life eternal in the same manner as the Lamb as is a symbol of Christ, our advocate. 2SR, pages 198 and 199. Now, brothers and sisters, the voice of inspiration made it so plain that the entire sanctuary is surrounded by the sea of glass. In the midst of the throne, before the throne, and around the throne, that is the sea of glass. Or in other words, the entire sanctuary is surrounded by the sea of glass. Now, here in 2SR 189, it says, note 2SR 189, note that around and before the throne in the sanctuary is the sea of glass. Now, what does it mean by that vision that was shown by God to John the Beloved, that in the second judicial sitting, there are saints standing on the sea of glass? Let us read first the statement, the first two judicial sittings. Now here in track number 15 on page Let us read on page 29, but beginning on page 28. In the typical atonement, everyone's destiny among the professed people of God was forever fixed. Those who complied with the demands of the law were left to live, and those who did not were cut off from among the people. Thus, it must also be in the antitypical atonement. In the typical service, only those who had come before God with confession and repentance, and whose sins through the blood of the sin offering were transferred to the sanctuary, had a part in the service of the Day of Atonement. So in the great day of final atonement and investigative judgment, the judgment of the first two sittings, you see, the judgment of the first two sittings, the time to separate the tares from the wheat, the bad fish from the good, from among both the dead and the living, from among both the dead and the living, the harvest. Then it says the only cases considered are those of the professed people of God. The Great Controversy, page 480. Those who have at one time or another accepted the call and have the right to be clad in the wedding garment. Thus the question, if the judgment first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? 1 Peter 4:17. Now, brothers and sisters, remember, the voice of inspiration declared clearly that in the most holy place, in the heavenly sanctuary, nothing is allowed to enter therein that defile it. But the absolute fact is that it is even more definite in the statement in 2 SR 192 that the only book that Jesus Christ will brought into the presence of God the Father in the most holy place is the Lamb's Book of Life, sealed with 7 seals. And the only names to be inscribed into that book are the names of the righteous whose sins are to be blotted out. Now here's another statement that I would like to read. To SR page 199. It says, the book, I would like to read in the upper portion. It says, the reward which is to be granted to those who are judged, sea of glass. What is the reward? Sea of glass. What is the sea of glass? Represents life eternal. So let us read again the statement in 2 SR 199. The reward which is to be granted to those who are judged, sea of glass. Then it says, and the book containing the names of all the righteous. The only names contained into that book are the names of all the righteous, beginning with Adam and on to the close of provision, the end of the gospel, 7 seals. And I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within and on the backside, sealed with 7 seals. Revelation 5 verse 1. Because the book contains the names of all who are sealed with the seal of God. Who are they that will be inscribed into that book? Only those who receive the seal of God. His truth, it is called the book of seals. Also, the Lamb's Book of Life, sealed with 7 seals. And that is the reason why the shepherd's rod inscribed it in plural form. Track number 3, page 7, it says that not every name that has been entered into the Lamb's books will be retained there. Why is it that it is inscribed in plural form, Lamb's books? Because the Lamb's books, the Lamb's book, which contain the names of a mixed multitude, that is not sealed with 7 seals. Because that books contains the names of the wicked and the righteous. And why is it that that books, which is a mixed multitude, inscribed in plural form, Lamb's books? Because it is divided into 7 different sections. Those who died under the first seal, those who died under the second seal, and those who died under the third seal, fourth seal, fifth seal, sixth seal, and seventh seal. So I would like to illustrate, brothers and sisters, this is the Lamb's Books of Life, which contain the names of the righteous and the wicked. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, then 1. 7 sections. And of course, the first section must be the first to be investigated. And those whose names will be left into this book, it will be transferred to the vessels. Why is it that it is inscribed in plural form? Vessels. Because there are 7 vessels. The only book in the heavenly sanctuary by which, brothers and sisters, which is called a purified or a clean book, that is vessels and represented by the barn. And this is the book by which the only names to be brought therein or to be inscribed therein are the names of the righteous, or the good fish, or the wheat. Now, I would like to try to elaborate, brothers and sisters, the true meaning of the cleansing of the sanctuary. Now, we already read with absolute facts that the only names, brothers and sisters, to be considered in the presence of God the Father are those names who have the seal, because the seal is their permit to enter therein. No one can enter into that place by which they failed to obtain the seal of the living God. And we know that according to the vision given by God to Enoch and also repeated by Apostle Jude Thaddeus, it is very plain. In 2SR 240, it says, "Said Enoch, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints." So the only one mentioned is the saints. Now in 241, it says, let us read, 2SR 241, "Coming back to the prophecy by Enoch, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints." The word thousands, being in plural, does not reveal the number of saints that come with him. But if the word 10,000s have no numerical definition of any kind, then the word 10 would be vain repetition and foreign to the scriptures. Therefore, we must look for a symbolical definition of the word. The number 10 has the same meaning as the 10 virgins of Matthew 25, denoting universal, the church as a body. Thus, it symbolically apprehends the saints collectively, all the saved from Adam to the end. Therefore, the prophecy by Enoch commenced its fulfillment in 1844, at which time the Lord came with the names and records of those who are sleeping in the grave. And it says, and when the investigation of the dead is finished, then he comes with the names of the living saints. First, with the 144,000. Now, that is very plain, brothers and sisters. The vision that was shown by God to Enoch is the same in the parable in Matthew 25. In Matthew 25, the coming of the bridegroom. Now, let us read again the statement in 2SR on page 181. It says, "The midnight cry was first proclaimed prior to 1844, and the coming of the bridegroom was Christ coming to the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary for the investigative judgment of the saints." The investigation being in 2 sections. First, the judgment for the dead, and the second for the living. The cry must be repeated. Otherwise, we would have no present truth for the time of the judgment of the living. What is the coming of the bridegroom? Christ coming to the most holy place. But you can easily discern, brothers and sisters, that Matthew 25 is more definitely and directly applied in the judgment for the living rather than for the dead, according to that reading in 2SR page 181. Let's read 2SR page 181. It says, "The cry for the living being of a greater importance to the world than the one for the dead, and as the virgins are a figure of the living church, the parable must have a direct application to the church at this present time, the coming of the bridegroom for the judgment for the living. But indirectly, it points back to the commencement of the midnight cry, the first angel's message, the judgment for the dead. When thus the midnight cry was proclaimed? Prior to 1844. That is very plain, right? 2SR 181. But what specific year? Now let us read White House Recruiter. White House Recruiter on page 19. It says, the only revelation of new prophetic truth subsequent to the Reformation is the announcement of the year in which was to begin the work of cleansing the sanctuary, primarily in behalf of the dead, based on Daniel 8:14, but not then fully understood as its announcement was made by the first-day Adventists. It necessarily follows that they were the third group of servants with a new and distinctive message, and as is well known, they started proclaiming it in the year 1833, announcing that the cleansing of the sanctuary was to commence in the year 1844. Thus, in 1833, the clock of the parabolic time struck the hour of 6. White House Recruiter on page 19. So, brothers and sisters, that is very plain. How many years? The proclamation of the midnight cry. 10 years. From 1833 to 1844. 10 years. The proclamation of the midnight cry. At that time, where is Jesus Christ? Now, it is closely connected to the subject of the trumpet. And it is also closely connected to our subject, the cross. What hour? In 1833, in the parabolic hour in Matthew 20, White House Recruiter, page 19. In 1833, thus the parabolic time struck on the hour of 6. But in our modern timepiece of clock, that is 12 noon. 12 noon. 1833. That is 12 noon. But in reality, in the illustration in the subject concerning the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, what happened to that 12 noon? Now, I would like to read, brothers and sisters, 2SR. It says here, 2SR on page 24 and 25. According to time tabulation, the Jewish rulers tried Jesus from 12 o'clock Thursday morning to about 6 o'clock Friday morning, ancient time. 9 hours later, at the third hour, Jesus was crucified. So that is 9 a.m. See Mark 15:25. After he had been on the cross for 3 hours, the sun was darkened at 6 o'clock noon. See Mark 15:33. What happened to the 12 noon? The sun was darkened. 3 hours later, Jesus died, and the sun again gave light. 2SR 24 and 25. And you will notice how perfect the scriptures, brothers and sisters. Now, I would like to read to you first track number 5. Here in track number 5. And ponder deeply, brothers and sisters, because it is a very important prophecy. Track number 5, page 62. It says, while he was dying on the cross, I would like to read the portion. It says, and the darkness covering the land, track number 5, page 62. And the darkness covering the land for the period of these 3 hours. How many hours that the darkness covering the land? What land? Palestine. For 3 hours, it says, shows that at the moment the 6 hours struck, the pit was opened. So, although at this time we will not focus on that portion, but on our next episode, we will prove to you the perfect connection of that subject, 12 noon, when the sun is in her full strength. I would like to remind again, brothers and sisters, it is very important to study this because that is the illustration when the third angel's message will swell into a loud cry it is illustrated that the sun is in her full strength. 12 noon at midday. Now let us read 1SR, page 21. It says, of the three angels of Revelation 14, verse 6 to 11, John writes, and I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, and the third angel followed them. These angels, following each other, were seen flying in the midst of heaven, where the sun would be at midday in its full strength. And the shepherd's rod made it so plain that the direct application of the third angel's message must be in the judgment for the living. General Conference Special, pages 39 and 40. It says, in fact, the three angels' messages are applicable to the judgment for the dead only indirectly. For the judgment for the living is the all-important event. That is, the angel is not sent particularly to explain what the judgment does to the dead, but what it is to do to the living. So we see that the more we consider the subject, the more obvious becomes the truth that the third angel's message in its final phase is the judgment for the living, the harvest. Plainly then, the work of Elijah is to give light on the judgment for the living. And if you still remember the statement in 2TJ, it says that when the judgment that pertains to the dead is finished, another message must be introduced. Let's read 2TJ number 11 on pages 12 and page 13. It says, for example, after the harvest, investigative judgment of the dead is past. Other truths, even more important, must be introduced for the harvest of the living. When that truths to be introduced, that is after the judgment that pertains to the dead is finished, after the judgment that pertains to the dead is past, after the judgment that pertains to the dead is closed, other truths even more important must be introduced for the harvest of the living. I say more important truths because they are concerning the living themselves, concerning those whose own cases are to be weighed in the balances, those who personally are to be judged either as wheat or as tares, either as good fish or as bad fish. Brothers and sisters, I would like to repeat again that the Bejan today, they were fighting against each other just to prove, brothers and sisters, that they are the true headquarters. And Satan is laughing in the dark because they were in total ignorance what is going on heaven. I remember here in 2SR page 92, it says, it is true that people like to be deceived, flattering themselves that they are on the way to heaven, while Satan winks at their ignorance. Ignorance on what? Ignorance on timely truth. White House Recruiter, page 31 and page 32. Let us not, however, forget that there is an enemy who is determined to keep God's people in darkness, in ignorance of timely truth. And what more damaging darkness could he seek to keep them in than in ignorance of that which God would have them to know while their judgment is pending, while they are being weighed in the balances of the sanctuary? None, absolutely none. 2TG number 30, page 15, it says that the devil is not particular what you believe. Let us once and forever realize that the devil is more shrewd than we can imagine. He is not particular what you believe so long as he can keep you ignorant of revealed truth. He is not particular whether you believe that the headquarters must be in Waco, the headquarters must be in Bashan or in Salem or whatever it is. He is not so particular with that. So long as the devil can keep you ignorant of what is going on in the heavenly sanctuary, you did not know that
all of us now is being weighed in the balances in the heavenly sanctuary. Because according to track number 3, page 54, for when a person's judgment is pending and he is unaware of the fact, he cannot stand when his case will be investigated. We are the people recorded in 2 TG 12:30. The people that who must know that their cases are on trial. That is what God wants us to know. But the devil is trying to keep us in the darkness. Now let us go back again, brothers and sisters, to our subject, the cleansing of the sanctuary. Why is it that, brothers and sisters, why is it that Matthew 25 is directly applied in the judgment for the living rather than for the dead? It's so because, brothers and sisters, Matthew 25 is pointing to the second coming of Christ to the most holy place. October 22, 1844 is only the first coming of Jesus Christ to the most holy place. And secondly, brothers and sisters, when William Miller began to proclaim the message in 1833, at that time, Jesus Christ is in the holy place, in the heavenly sanctuary, in the third heaven. Now, I would like to show to you, this is the sanctuary, and this is the holy place, then most holy place. In 1833, Jesus Christ is in the holy place. Now, I would like to read to you track number 3. Here in track number 3, it says here, track number 3 on page 17 and page 18. To this throne, then which is from everlasting to everlasting, Christ ascended and thereat sat down at the right hand of his Father, until the time came when, in fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy and of John's revelation, sometime after the little horn power came into existence, both he and his Father moved to the sanctuary throne. Upon the latter, he does not sit as a king at the right hand of God, but rather before it does, he stands both as a sacrificial lamb, Revelation 5 verse 6, and as an intercessor, Daniel 7 verse 13, pleading for sinful human beings. Hence, his mediatorial work began first in the holy, then in the most holy. Track number 3, page 17 and 18. And that Christ's mediatorial work commenced in 1833 in the holy place. Therefore, the word coming is not in reality exactly portrayed the event in 1844. Because the event that takes place in 1844, in reality, Jesus Christ is already in that sanctuary, only on the holy place. But what happened in October 22, 1844? The veil was lifted. Therefore, grammatically incorrect to say that Jesus Christ is coming to the most holy place, brothers and sisters, in 1844, while in reality, he was already there in 1833. The things that happened in October 22, 1844, the veil was lifted, and the entire sanctuary became most holy place. I would like to read, brothers and sisters, the statement in 2SR. Let us read 2SR page 200. Let's read 2SR page 215. It says, the altar is in the holy place, just opposite the throne that is in the most holy. The two apartments were separated by a veil. In the day of atonement, the veil or door of the earthly tabernacle was opened, and the high priest went in. But let it be remembered that the door veil was left open while the high priest officiated. Thus the two apartments became one. For this reason, the congregation were not permitted in the holy place on the day as they were at other times. For the veil being lifted, the holy place also became most holy. So while the door to the most holy was opened, the entrance to the holy was closed. Now, let us ponder deeply, brothers and sisters, and let us illustrate the situation. So, in the vision given by God to Prophet John, the beloved, brothers and sisters, now, let us put this way. So, this is the most holy place. The throne of God the Father Now, brothers and sisters, in the throne of God the Father, there is a sea of glass, and this entire most holy place are surrounded by sea of glass. Now, when this veil will be opened, this holy place will become most holy. Therefore, the entire sanctuary is full, surrounded by the sea of glass. Now, before the veil was lifted in 1833, the books, the book of death, the book of the dead, or those books by which the book represented by the sea is here in the holy place. These books, the names recorded in these books, the book represented by the sea, all the names recorded here are the names of the wicked, as well as the book of death. All names recorded here are names of the wicked. Now, what will happen if the veil will be lifted and the book's still there, and then the sea of glass will come out from the throne of God the Father, and this place will be filled with sea of glass? What will happen to these books? All the names recorded therein, they must obtain eternal life, because the sea of glass represent eternal life, and that could not be. It is impossible. And that is the reason why Alonzo Jones says that in October 22, 1844, it is the sanctuary itself that had been cleansed. And in order for the sanctuary to be cleansed, all the books, brothers and sisters, by which it contains the names of the wicked are brought down to the second heaven. So, we would like to illustrate to you now. Here, this is the third heaven, and this is the sanctuary. Now, before the veil will be lifted, that this sanctuary will be, the entire sanctuary become most holy place, before the veil will be lifted, all the books by which contains the names of the wicked are transferred to the sanctuary in second heaven. No wonder why Apostle Paul used the term holy places. In October 22, 1844, the entire sanctuary in the heavenly sanctuary in third heaven, most holy place. And the holy place is in the second heaven. So, in the second heaven, the entire sanctuary, it is called holy place. And here the names, the books by which contains the names of the wicked and also the mixed multitude, names of the wicked and the righteous, is transferred into this place. Therefore, October 22, 1844, the vision of Daniel is perfectly correct, that the sanctuary is cleansed. At that time, on that day of atonement, this sanctuary is cleansed. And the only names that had been left in this sanctuary, which become most holy place, are the names of the righteous. Who are they? Those who died under the first four seals, according to the shepherd's rod. Why? Because these first four seals, they are those who will be resurrected at the second visible coming of Jesus Christ. And if Jesus Christ will include the fifth seal, who are they, the fifth seal? The Millerites. Then if Jesus Christ will include the records of the fifth seal, then there must be standing on the sea of glass. What does it mean, standing? Meaning, the names of those who remain in the most holy place, all of them are no longer standing. They were lying unconscious in their graves. But if the fifth seal is included, brothers and sisters, then the vision of John must be wrong, brothers and sisters. But the Bible cannot be mistaken. That at the first judicial sitting, no one standing on the sea of glass. So the fifth seal, the record of the fifth seal are in the second heaven, in the holy place. Because the constituent of the fifth seal, many of them are still alive. If the record of the fifth seal remain in the most holy place, when the veil was lifted, then God would be obliged to translate them to heaven without seeing death. Because all the names that will be in the most holy place, surrounded by the sea of glass, if that names that had been brought into the most holy place, he is still living on the earth, then indicates that immortality is granted. And that is on the second sitting when Jesus Christ will enter to the most holy place, the second coming, the second invisible coming of Jesus Christ. That names that He brought into the presence of God the Father on earth, they were still alive, and they will no longer to taste death, because their names had been brought into the presence of God the Father while they were alive. They will no longer to taste death, brothers and sisters. Now, let's continue to our investigation in this very important subject. I would like to read, brothers and sisters, this statement on, I think, 2SR. Let's read 2SR page 173. Remember, we are studying the open and shut door. And in 1844, the door that was closed is the entrance to the holy place. And the entrance to the most holy place was left open. And that entrance to the most holy place, brothers and sisters, will be closed only when probation closed to all humanity. So, in October 22, 1844, after all the books containing the names of the wicked had been transferred to the second heaven, the holy place in the second heaven, the sanctuary in the second heaven, the sanctuary in the third heaven is cleansed. And the only names that had been left are the names of the righteous, those who will be resurrected on Revelation 25 and 6, as well as 1 Thessalonians 4, 15 to 16. Now, I would like to read first. That's reading in 1 TG. 1 TG number, let's read. 1 TG number 11 on page 10. It says, the cleansing of the sanctuary, 1 TG 11:10. The cleansing of the sanctuary, Daniel 8:14. The purification of it by blotting out from the books, Daniel 7 verse 10, the names of those who are found not eligible to come up in the first resurrection, the resurrection of the holy ones, Revelation 20 verse 5 and 6. Who are they to be resurrected, brothers and sisters, on the second visible coming of Jesus Christ? Well, I think we need to separate that subject, the subject, or still in this subject, the chronological order of events, but we will focus on concerning the resurrection and that translation. But at this time, we focus our attention, brothers and sisters, to the cleansing of the sanctuary. The cleansing of the sanctuary. And there are only two places by which the sanctuary is to be cleansed. First, the third heaven, and then the second heaven. Now, I would like to read to you 2 TG number 12 on page 29. It says, 2 TG 12, 29 and 30. The only difference you see is that Daniel was shown the judgment being set up, whereas John saw it in full session. The revelation, moreover, in the following verses again and again endeavors to make us see that the event there portrayed is the judgment in session. Fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come. And I saw thrones, John declares, and judgment was given unto them. Revelation 20 verse 4. John truly penned it as a prophecy, but when it actually takes place, then God's agency on earth, the spirit of prophecy in the church, is to proclaim that the event has actually taken place. Since the records of both the dead and the living must be reviewed by the judicial tribunal, the first angel's message, Revelation 14 verse 6, must be proclaimed in both periods, in the period of the judgment of the dead and by a loud cry in the period of the judgment of the living. The direct application of first angel's message, therefore also the call to come out of Babylon, are actually made in the day the earth is lightened with the glory of the angel. See Revelation 18 verse 1 to 4. The revelation, therefore, is to be more fully understood during the judgment of the living. Now, Revelation 14, 6 and 7 and Revelation 20 verse 4, according to this reading, is applied to both judgment. Judgment that pertains to the dead and judgment that pertains to the living. But let us focus first to Revelation 20 verse 4. Now, let us read track number 15. Track number 15. I would like to read first page 23. Track 15, 23. Moreover, as there is but one judicial sitting during the millennium, the thrones of verse 4 must be in session jointly with the great white throne. Furthermore, it is not likely that the great white throne would be in session all by itself. Now let's go to track 15, page 18. The third session, the one during the 1,000 years, is at the great white throne, Revelation 20, verse 11 to 12. The throne of him from whose face the earth and the heaven flee away. At this latter throne, there is no sea of glass, no beast, no lion, no lamb. And although there are lesser thrones, so the great white throne, there is no sea of glass, there is no beast, there is no lion, there is no lamb. That is the great white throne. But why is it that it says, although there are lesser thrones, why is it the shepherd's rod called Revelation 20 verse 4, lesser thrones? And there are lesser thrones. Revelation 20 verse 4, inspiration does not flatly say who sits on them. Now, brothers and sisters, we know that the illustration in the most holy place is a replica also to the holy place. But why is it that Revelation 20 verse 4 are called lesser thrones? Because in this study, the most holy place, if we will compare to the earthly tribunal, that is the supreme court, the higher court. So second heaven, the thrones there are called lesser thrones, brothers and sisters. It is a branch of the court in the supreme court. And the voice of inspiration says, although it did not flatly say who sits on them, and it did not flatly say how many thrones are there, but for sure, it is more than one thrones or one throne. More than one throne, because it is inscribed in plural form. But for sure, that is the thrones in the holy place. And thrones represents judicial proceedings. So let us distinctly separate the judicial proceedings in the most holy place and the judicial proceedings in the holy place, which is the second heaven, which is called the lesser thrones. Now, I would like to read to you another statement in track number 1. Let's read. Track number 1. It says here, track number 1, page 8. Since the throne seen by Isaiah was a train written new, and since as it entered into the temple, the post of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Isaiah 6 verse 1 and 4. It therefore is a traveling throne, whereas both the one of Revelation chapter 4, having the sea of glass before it, and the one in Revelation 22, having the river of life before it, are stationary thrones. There are two stationary thrones. And what is that two stationary thrones? The other one is cometh the river of life. But the other stationary throne cometh the sea of glass. And that is in the most holy place. Therefore, the throne in the most holy place is stationary. Right, brothers and sisters? It is stationary. And the other stationary throne, that is called the administrative throne. There are two stationary thrones. The administrative throne, which cometh the river of life, and the other stationary throne is the judgment throne located in the most holy place, where the sea of glass cometh from that throne. Now let us continue to the next paragraph. It says here, though the one which Ezekiel saw, and that is Ezekiel chapter 1, very important event, the climactic vision, brothers and sisters, ever recorded in the Bible. Though the one which Ezekiel saw is similar to the one which Isaiah was shown, yet they are distinct and separate thrones. For each of the seraphims of Isaiah's vision has 6 wings, while each of the cherubims of Ezekiel's visions has but 4. In the latter, moreover, the cherubims stood under the throne, whereas in the former, they stood above it. On record, there are 4 thrones, 2 stationary and 2 traveling. Now, I would like to illustrate the statement, brothers and sisters. What is the statement given by the shepherd's rod? I would like to make an illustration. According to that reading, brothers and sisters, that in the vision that was shown by God to Isaiah and Ezekiel, in Isaiah chapter 6, the seraphims stood above the throne. So the throne must be here. So, because they standing above the throne. I would like to read again. Track number 1 on page 8. It says, in the latter, moreover, the cherubim stood under the throne, whereas in the former, they stood above it. So the word former meaning the former that had been mentioned, that is the seraphims. The seraphims stood above the throne. So the seraphims stood above the throne. And the cherubims stood under the throne. Now let us explain first. The seraphim stood above the throne. If the only throne that we know is the throne in the most holy place, the stationary throne which is located in the third heaven, then are we saying, brothers and sisters, that the seraphim stood above the throne? There is fourth heaven? Because they stood above the throne. So the throne must be in the third heaven. And the seraphim stood above the throne. And that is why it's very important to understand the cleansing of the sanctuary. Because the statement, the seraphim stood above the throne, to understand it clearly, the seraphims stood above the throne in the second heaven, which is the holy place, because the seraphims is in the most holy place, because the seraphims, they are the angels of God the Father. And the cherubims stood under the throne in the third heaven, which is the most holy place, because the cherubims, they are the angels of Jesus Christ, and they have a great duty to perform, and they were in the throne in the holy place. And they were the angels to perform the cleansing, the books in the holy place, to blot out the names of the wicked, according to the Bible, according to the shepherd's rod. Now, I would like to read 2TG. 2TG number 11. So, let us read page 5. Here we see that even the idea of the most faithful servants of God as to the setting up of His kingdom and the weeding out the tails are not the same as God's plans. This cleansing work belongs only to the angels of heaven. But I would like to declare, brothers and sisters, that the angels mentioned here to blot out the names of the wicked, they are the cherubims. This cleansing work belongs only to the angels of heaven, and this they will do in the time of harvest, after being commanded to do so, not before. When does the time of harvest? Track number 3, page 42 and page 43. In both of these parables, Christ is sounding the forewarning that the investigative judgment will take place in the time called harvest, which is the end of the world, the time in which the 2,300 days culminates. Track number 3, 42 and 43. But, of course, in 1833, what is the proceedings in 1833? Brothers and sisters, from 1833 to 1844, what is the proceedings? So, I would like to show a very simple illustration. So, from 1833 to, I would like to, October 21, 1844, the work of Jesus Christ here is blotting, not blotting out, blotting the names of the wicked. For example, this is the Lamb's Book of Life. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. For example, this name, Jesus Christ will blot. An example, this name, Jesus Christ will blot. Why is it that Jesus Christ will blot the names? Because in October 22, 1844, all the names by which it is commingled with wicked and righteous, it was transferred to the second heaven, holy place. And what is the statement given by the shepherd's rod? It is the angels who will blot out the names of the wicked at the time when they were commanded to do so. When? At the commencement of the harvest. Harvest of what? The dead. When does it commence? October 22, 1844. So, it is no longer difficult for them to blot out the names because it was already blotted by Jesus Christ. So, they can never commit mistake. If Jesus Christ will not blot the names, they are not worthy to know who are they, whose names to be retained, and whose names to be blotted out. They have no knowledge. So Jesus Christ blotted the names within these 10 years. When all the names have been blotted, only, brothers and sisters, to the temple. Because there are 3 groups, brothers and sisters, to pass the investigation temple, altar, and worshippers. But in 1833 to 1844, that is only the temple. Therefore, when all the books had been transferred to the holy place, then that is the fulfillment of that vision that the seraphims is standing above the throne. That is the throne in the holy place. The seraphims are standing above that throne because they were in the most holy place, and the cherubims are standing under the throne in the most holy place because they were in the holy place in second heaven. Because the entire sanctuary in October 22, 1844 in the third heaven became most holy place. And that is the Bible says holy places. Brothers and sisters, according to the book of Hebrews, chapter 9, holy places. Now, let us go back to our reading, as I've said, brothers and sisters. Let us go back to 2SR. If only we have definite understanding, brothers and sisters, concerning the sanctuary doctrine, it will not be difficult to comprehend the subject. But the fact is that we need ample time just to explain, brothers and sisters, what is going on in the heavenly sanctuary. Now, I would like to read 2SR 173. It says, let us read the statement. After the investigation is completed, 2SR 173. After the investigation is completed and every case decided, the temple of the testimony will open similar to when the typical open at the close of the sacrificial system. I would like to read again. It says, after the investigation is completed and every case decided, the temple of the testimony will open similar to when the typical open at the close of the sacrificial system. Now, let us read the statement in Bible commentary. So let us read again. Bible commentary for BC 1138 and 1139. And maybe you can read these 2 pages, all of them, 1138 and 1139, so that you yourself could comprehend the true import of the message recorded therein. Now, I would like to read for BC 1138. It says, Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah chapter 6. Then the quotation is Revelation 11 verse 19. Now, if you fully believe that Sister White is inspired by the same spirit of inspiration that inspired the Bible, then we need to accept what had been written here. I would like to read first that statement in Answerer. Answerer number 3 on page 59. Answerer number 3, page 59. Since this prophetic gift was manifest through Sister White, as has been evidentially established, she necessarily then wrote under the divine inspiration as did the Bible writers. Brothers and sisters. Answerer number 3, page 59. As did the Bible writers. So it says here, brothers and sisters, Isaiah chapter 6, Revelation 11:19, and it says, Isaiah's experience represents last day church. Do not forget that. This vision of Isaiah illustrate the last day church. There is no other last day church except the 11th hour church. Now let us read 1 TG 27. 1 TG number 27, page 8. It says, the same chapter that had been commented in this paragraph, Isaiah chapter 6. Since this message announces that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is at hand. What is the great and dreadful day of the Lord? That is the last and the final day of atonement. Brothers and sisters, if you will look at the type, they proclaimed the message 1833 to 1844. That is 10 years. Would you think that is just a mere happenstance that God's people began proclaiming this message since 2011 plus 10, then you will fall on 2021? No, that is purposive design. 2021 is very critical, brothers and sisters. That is the great and dreadful day of the Lord. The spiritual side, the blotting out of names. That is dreadful to those names that had been blotted out. But that is a great day to all of them whose names had been retained in the Lamb's Book of Life. Now, I would like to read 1 TG 27, page 8. Since the message announces that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is at hand, that the judgment for the living is about to begin. This statement, brothers and sisters, it was written for the purpose in proclaiming the message this very year, 2020, because the blotting out of names is about to begin. Now, I would like to read again the statement, 1 TG 27, page 8. Since this message announces that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is at hand, that the judgment for the living is about to begin, and since Isaiah the prophet was given a vision of the Lord's moving into his temple for this judicial work, the prophet experiences while he was yet in vision must therefore represent the experience of God's servants who are to announce the day of the Lord. His experience and commission must be our experience and commission. Whose church is this? Is it the Seventh-day Adventist Church? The Seventh-day Adventist Church has no knowledge concerning the great and dreadful day of the Lord. General Conference Special, page 39, it says, the judgment for the dead, furthermore, is not the message of the great and dreadful day. It does not even touch on the prophecies of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Do not even touch, do not even mention. How could the Seventh-day Adventist Church be able to proclaim that message when that message was not and never entrusted to them? The only group of people must be the Davidian, you and I, if we will be faithful. But I would like to emphasize the explanation given by the spirit of prophecy. Let us read page 1139. It says, the vision given to Isaiah represents the condition of God's people in the last days. They are privileged to see by faith the work that is going forward in the heavenly sanctuary. What a high privilege to see by faith the work that is going forward in the heavenly sanctuary. That statement is the same with 2SR 237. 3-hour schedule, closely connected to the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, that the principal reason that Jesus Christ followed that particular rule is to present to His church the exact time of her history by periods. And that church is the 11th hour church according to 2SR 234. Because the truth of the parable has never been understood by any other company except the 11th hour church. Now let us read again the statement for BC 1139. The vision given to Isaiah represents the condition of God's people in the last days. They are privileged to see by faith that the work that is going forward in the heavenly sanctuary. Some will mock us and ridicule us instead of giving thanks and praise to the Lord that we have been given the privilege to know what is going on in the heavenly sanctuary. The question is, 1SM 122, are we awake to the work that is going on in the heavenly sanctuary? And in Testimonies for the Church, volume 6, what is the statement, brethren? It says here, brethren, to whom the truths of God's word had been opened, what part will you act in the closing scenes of this world's history? Are you awake to these solemn realities? Do you realize the grand work of preparation that is going on in heaven and on earth? And in 1 TG number 51, on page 5 and 6, if the church is not commensurably growing and expanding, then how can she be a living church? And how can she keep up with the signs of the times and with the progress in the sanctuary above? I remember the statement in the Great Controversy. It says here, the Great Controversy, page 488 and 489. The subject of the sanctuary and the investigative judgment should be clearly understood by the people of God. All need a knowledge for themselves of the position and work of their great high priest. Otherwise, it will be impossible for them to exercise the faith which is essential at this time or to occupy the position which God designs them to fill. Every individual has a soul to save or to lose. Each has a case pending at the bar of God. Each must meet the great judge face to face. How important then that every mind contemplate often the solemn scene when the judgment shall sit and the book shall be opened, when with Daniel every individual must stand in his lot at the end of the days. The great controversy, 488 and 489. In 482 and 483, it says, the deepest interest manifested among men in the decisions of earthly tribunals, but faintly represents the interest events in the heavenly courts when the names entered in the book of life come up in review before the judge of all the earth. The great controversy, 482 and 483. But look at the Bedean, instead of giving thanks to the Lord of such a high privilege, what they did on Facebook, they speak evil, mocking God's people. Brothers and sisters, my dear brothers and sisters, it was guaranteed by the Bible. It was guaranteed by Jesus Christ that nobody can explain what is going on in the heavenly sanctuary. Even the devil either cannot do such thing. Only Jesus Christ. Now, if we have been able to explain what is going on in the heavenly sanctuary, then you are saying that Jesus Christ is telling a lie. That we have been able to explain the occurrence in the heavenly sanctuary without the Spirit of Christ. Think it thoroughly, the declaration given in the Bible. That is very plain in Revelation chapter 5. It says here, in Revelation chapter 5, verse 3, and no man in heaven, nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereon. Why is it that we have been able, brothers and sisters, to see what is on that book? Because it is opened by Jesus Christ unto us. That is the only attainable conclusion, brothers and sisters. Now, I would like to read to you here in 2 TJ 24, on page 16. It says, are not these tests strong enough to convince anyone that the secret things of God, such as the counsel prophecies, regardless how simple, are not disclosed by finite men? No, not by the devil either. That when God wants a thing to be a secret, though it be plain and simple, it remains counseled until He Himself reveals it. Then when it is revealed, all are to know that God Himself is at work. 2 TG 24:16. And that statement is even more definitely applied to the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, because that open and shut door is pointing to the heavenly sanctuary. Early writings, page 42. It says, brothers and sisters, early writings, page 42, the open and the shut door. I saw that Jesus has shut the door of the holy place, and no man can open it. What does it mean by no man can open it? Would you think the statement in early writings, page 43, saying the enemies of the present truth had been trying to open the door of the holy place in the heavenly sanctuary, that Jesus has shut, and to close the door of the most holy place, which He has opened in 1844, where the ark is, containing the 2 tables of stone on which are written the 10 commandments by the finger of Jehovah? Ponder deeply. You think that is literal? Are you saying that the wicked is in the third heaven and they are trying to open the door in the holy place and trying to close, brothers and sisters, the entrance in the most holy place? Think it thoroughly, brethren. The only thing before the entrance in the holy place was closed, the only thing that was shown by God to Sister White, there are only 2 things. The Ark of the Covenant, by which the 10 commandments, by which the 4th commandment shine brighter among the 10. And the second one is the pot of manna, which represent obeying the 10 commandments and also health reform as the right arm of the 3rd angel's message. And that is the only thing that was shown to Sister White. And then after that, it was closed. Then after it was closed, no man can open it. What does it mean? It was proven with absolute fact. Nobody explains. Brothers and sisters, that what is the proceedings in 1844? even to engage in private interpretation, it was controlled by God. Nobody been able to engage in private interpretation. It is silent. Nobody explains. Because that is the divine decree, that whatever God had closed, Jesus Christ closed, nobody can open. And only Jesus Christ can open it. And the mere fact that we have that full understanding, the entire proceeding from start to finish, as stated in Tract 15, page 13, the only tenable conclusion is that the promise given in 2 TG 12:30, that the book of Revelation is to be more fully understood during the judgment of the living, by which the book of Revelation is pointing to the entire proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary from start to finish. Tract 15, page 13, which is the complete unfoldment of the seven seals. Because in 2 TG 12, 24 and 25, that the seven seals is the plan of redemption, by which in 2 SR 187, that you cannot understand the subject of the seven seals unless you have a complete understanding concerning the sanctuary service and construction, because the plan of redemption is revealed through the sanctuary construction and service. As the Bible said, Psalm 77 verse 13, thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Therefore, the sanctuary reveals the truth, past, present, and future. Great Controversy, page 423. And this vision of Sister White is indicating provisionary time. You can read to yourself. For BC 1138, I know the righteous will be happy. They will be glad. What a privilege to know what is going on in the heavenly sanctuary, to prepare our lives so that our names will be among that names that will be retained in the Lamb's Book of Life. What a great day for the righteous. Experience only can tell, according to 2 SR 102. Experience only can tell the joy of one's heart, rescued from everlasting ruin. At the same time, 1 SR 185, experience only can tell the sorrow and grief of such a one. The disappointment of such a one is greater than we could realize. Brothers and sisters, we are not pity of ourselves, brothers and sisters, of what these professed shepherds, not believers, speaking evil against us. No, we are not. It says here in 1 TG 45:14, we do not pity ourselves and are not at all angry at our adversaries, but we are sorry about their spiritual blindness, misery, poverty, and nakedness. For we know that the coming joy is to be ours, and the sorrow and shame and gnashing of teeth theirs. This we know, as verily as Jacob knew that God was with him in his flight from the face of Esau. 1 TG 45, page 14. The same as in the days of Noah. Brothers and sisters, the time will come when everything ceases to be funny. It says here in 1 TG number 50, I would like to read. It says, Noah was commanded to build an ark and to tell the world, 1 TG 50:15, that a flood was to cover the earth, that only those who would get into the ark would escape alive. 120 years later, the animals were strangely seen to march to and through into the ark. Noah and his family also went in, while the rest of the world laughed and ridiculed. But when the rain began to fall, the situation ceased to be funny. Those outside the ark cried, mourned, plead, but all perished as fools, only because they had failed to give heed to present truth, had failed to feed on meat on due season. What folly, what disaster. And the illustration is with the foolish virgins, according to 2 SR page 183. This is the statement given by the voice of inspiration. Brothers and sisters, it says, as the foolish virgins at last came to the door, it is evident that they obtained the oil. Learn of the message. This is 2 SR 183. But there had been a delay. The door was shut and they were left out. Now, why were they unconcerned at first and very zealous at last? The experience in this instance is about the same as that of the deluge. While Noah preached the coming of the flood, The word paid little attention to his message, but those who believed went into the ark at a given time, and the door was closed. But not long afterwards, signs of Noah's predictions appeared, became, and as drops of rain began to fall, the wicked multitude became alarmed and rushed for the ark, but the door was closed and they were left out. The door that was shut is a symbol showing that provision for the church had closed just shortly after the foolish virgins became alarmed. At last they were willing to pay the price and buy the oil, but it was not a change of heart, only the fear of losing out. Their course of action had left them without the seal. The man with the writer inkhorn had passed them by. What a terrible mistake. What a disappointment. Almost saved, but entirely lost. Hoping, brothers and sisters, that we will be awakened to the reality before everything is too late. I love all the Berean. I love all the Shepherd's Rod believers. I know they were better than me. I know that they were good people. But we need to remember what happened in the days of Noah. That is very plain in 1 TG number 12. I would like to read 1 TG number 12, page 27 and 28. You remember that while Noah was preaching that a destruction would come from the Almighty, he was also preparing a place of refuge, building the ark. Those who doubted Noah's announcement of the flood and who scoffed at the idea that they should enter the ark for safety at a time when there was not even the slightest sign of threatening rain, were doubters no longer when the elements of nature were unleashed. Then they madly rushed to the ark. But to their dismay and utter disappointment, they found the door tightly closed against them. Thus all, both good and bad, who choose to remain outside the ark perish. The antediluvian experience should serve as a reminder to us that we be not presumptuous as were they. We should instead take to heart the clear warning that is pertinent to this hour. For we are told that as it was in the days of the flood, so shall it be at the time of the Lord's coming. So our goodness is not a guarantee, because in reality, in the sight of God, our righteousness is just but a filthy rags. So here, brothers and sisters, it says in 1 TG number 42, page 10, you certainly now see Zion's reward and God's mighty effort to inform you of this truth. You surely will do all you can to escape God's vengeance and to join this layman's movement for the gathering of the people. 1 TG 42, page 10. And in 2 TG 21, page 15, it says here, this is the statement given by the voice of inspiration. You must therefore not fail wholeheartedly and actually join this mighty layman's movement for revival and reformation throughout Laodicea, and to finish the gospel work with a church fair as the moon, clear as the sun, and terrible as an army with banners. She is to go forth into all the world, conquering and to conquer. Prophets and Kings, page 725. You cannot afford to lose out. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. Thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. God bless the layman's movement.